Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today. Look, if you love a good high-stakes legal mystery, especially one that untangles this incredibly complex web of property rights, government power, and the law, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating Supreme Court decision out of the Philippines that wrestles with a fundamental question of justice. So let's just dive right into this. I want you to imagine for a second that you're a business owner. You've got a fleet of vehicles, and you rent one out in good faith. You sign a totally standard lease contract, hand over the keys, and, go about your life. But then, a few weeks later, you find out your vehicle was intercepted by law enforcement because the person renting it used it to commit a crime. And now, the government wants to permanently confiscate your property. You had absolutely nothing to do with this illegal act, but boom, your vehicle is on the chopping block. Can they actually do that? Well, that is the exact dilemma at the heart of today's explainer. Section 1. The illegal lumber bust, the crime and the confiscation. To really understand how we get to that massive legal question, we first need to look at the inciting incident that kicked off this entire battle. We're heading to the province of Catanduanes, where the magic number is 196. That's exactly how many pieces of illegal lumber were found just piled high inside a rented 10-wheeler Isuzu dump truck during a bust on March 13, 2018. The two guys operating the truck had literally zero legal documents or certifications from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, which I'm just going to call the DNR from here on out. This was a clear-cut, undeniable violation of the country's forestry code. Now, what is really wild about this is just how blazingly fast the wheels of the justice system turned. Just look at this timeline. Day 1, March 13th, the arrest happens. By day 4, March 16th, the two accused men are already arraigned. They plead guilty to the environmental crime, and a judgment is issued. By day 8, law enforcers officially refused to give consent to release that dump truck, and by day 10, March 22nd, the regional trial court officially orders the confiscation of the truck in favor of the government. I mean, in just 10 days, the truck is gone. And remember, the actual owner of the truck hasn't even been a part of this conversation yet. Section 2. The truck owner's defense. An innocent bystander? Let's shift our perspective over to Eastern Island Shipping Lines Corporation, the registered owner of the truck. Watching their highly valuable business asset just vanish into thin air, they decide it's time to mount a defense. So they file a motion with the court, stepping in as a third-party claimant. They basically argue, wait a minute, we had absolutely zero knowledge of this crime, we did not participate in illegal logging. They explain that they simply leased the truck out to a guy named Elmer Bellin under a totally valid contract. From their point of view, they are a completely innocent bystander whose property is being unfairly snatched away, and they essentially beg the court to release the truck. Section 3. A clash of laws. Special law versus general law. Well, the trial court says no to releasing it, setting the stage for a heavyweight legal battle. Let's break down this clash. First, we've got the regional trial court. They applied Presidential Decree 705, the Forestry Code, which is a special environmental law. The trial court read this super strictly, pointing out that it says machinery and tools used in forestry crimes must be confiscated. To them, the law makes absolutely no exemption for ownership. If the truck carried illegal wood, the truck gets seized, end of story. But Eastern Island appealed, and then the Court of Appeals stepped in and totally reversed the trial court. The Court of Appeals applied Article 45 of the revised Penal Code, which is a general law, and that law explicitly states that instruments of a crime are confiscated except when they belong to a third person not liable for the offense. Basically, they ruled the innocent owner has to be protected. Section 4. Two kinds of confiscation. Untangling the jargon. Okay, so this battle escalates all the way up to the Supreme Court. The government is arguing the environmental law should trump the general penal code, while the truck owner is saying their constitutional rights are being completely trampled on. To solve this mess, the justices pointed out that everyone was getting confused because there are actually two entirely different kinds of confiscation happening here. There's judicial confiscation, which is ordered by a judge in a courtroom as a penalty after a criminal conviction. And then there's administrative confiscation, which is an executive action carried out directly by the DNR, totally independent of any criminal trial. The Supreme Court noted that understanding this specific distinction is the absolute linchpin to solving the whole case. You see, if the DNR wants to administratively confiscate a vehicle, they absolutely have exclusive jurisdiction to do so. But they have to follow a really rigorous, standardized procedure outlined in an administrative order called DAO 9732. It lays out 4 distinct steps: apprehension of the vehicle, official seizure into government custody, summary administrative confiscation hearings, where everybody gets noticed, and finally, forfeiture when it's submitted to judicial proceedings. The key here is that the owner actually gets a fair chance to present controverting evidence during those administrative hearings. But here is the massive twist in the story. There was absolutely no showing that the DNR followed this 4-step process for the dump truck. They skipped it entirely. Because of that, the Supreme Court determined that what happened to Eastern Island's truck was purely a judicial confiscation. It was just an accessory penalty handed down by the trial judge merely because those 2 men driving the truck decided to plead guilty. And that sets up a truly brilliant legal maneuver by the Supreme Court. The government was arguing that because the Forestry Code is a special law, it automatically overrides the General Revised Penal Code. But the Supreme Court pointed right at Article 10 of the Penal Code. This article allows the general law to be supplementary, basically to act as a backup and fill in the blanks whenever a special law is silent. And wouldn't you know it, the specific section of the Forestry Code dealing with judicial confiscation mentions machinery, equipment, and tools, but it is completely silent on the word conveyances, meaning vehicles. Because it's silent on vehicles, the General Penal Code steps right in as the rule. And as we learned just a minute ago, the General Penal Code explicitly protects innocent third-party owners. Section 5, the Supreme Court ruling. Balancing the scales of justice. First off, the Supreme Court comes down incredibly hard on the regional trial court. They declare that the trial court was absolutely 100% wrong to deny the truck owner a hearing. The judge couldn't just casually confiscate the truck without giving Eastern Island Shipping a chance to prove they had zero part in the crime. In fact, the Supreme Court stated that by violating the owner's fundamental right to due process, the trial court completely ousted itself from jurisdiction. That means their order to confiscate the truck was legally void. So the truck owner wins, right? Well, hold your horses. In a really fascinating twist, the Supreme Court ruled that the Court of Appeals was also wrong. Remember, the Court of Appeals had ordered the truck to be released immediately to the owner? But the Supreme Court said, wait just a second. The truck owner just attached some photocopies of a lease contract to a motion. Those documents were never formally presented or verified in an actual trial. The crucial takeaway here is that due process is a two-way street. The government also deserves the right to examine the owner's evidence, cross-examine witnesses, and figure out if that lease contract is actually real or if it's just a really convenient cover story. This brilliantly illustrates just how meticulous the Supreme Court really is. They didn't just pick a winner and walk away. Their final verdict was to remand the case. They sent it right back down to the regional trial court and ordered them to hold a proper, formal hearing. The truck owner is finally going to get their day in court to officially present their evidence of innocence, and the government is going to get their fair chance to challenge it. Only then can a real legal decision be made about the fate of that dump truck. Section 6. Why due process matters. The constitutional guarantee. So why does this dense, highly technical, legal battle over a single dump truck actually matter to you and me? It matters because it's a massive stress test of one of our most fundamental protections as citizens. It all boils down to this powerful quote from the Bill of Rights in the 1987 Philippine Constitution. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The Supreme Court used this exact case to draw a firm line in the sand. They made it crystal clear that mere suspicion of a crime is never enough for the government to take your property. Even if your property is used in a crime by someone else, the state cannot just seize it because it's convenient. You must be informed. You must be heard. You must have your day in court. And so I'll leave you with this thought. We are constantly sharing, renting, and lending out the things we own, right? It's literally a foundation of our modern economy. But if you hand over the keys to your property today, how well protected is it tomorrow? The Supreme Court ruling is an incredible reminder that while the government has powerful tools to fight crime, the shield of due process remains firmly in place to protect the innocent. Thank you so much for joining me today for this explainer, to explore the fascinating mechanics of the law. I really hope breaking it down like this helped you grasp the incredible balancing act taking place in our courts every single day. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.